Welcome to the Creating Opportunities podcast. This is a place where we help smart, ambitious professionals create better relationships for success. And why? Because people matter. They're messy, but they make life better and they matter. And I am your host, Cassandra. I am a speaker, trainer, an iced coffee lover. It's important you know that. And I am here to help you make deeper connections. So let's get into it. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. Today, my guest is Christina. I should have asked this before we got on. Lenkowski?
Nailed it. Yep. Very phonetic. You got it.
Well, in a past life, and by past life, I mean my first job, I actually taught Pat Sajak how to pronounce contestant names on Wheel of Fortune.
What?
I'm not joking.
Amazing job. That is the best party story of like all time.
I normally am pretty good at pronunciation, and if I'm not, I'm good at phonetically writing it. I would double check with contestants and then make sure he pronounced it right.
I love that.
So Christina is our guest today. I'm very excited for this conversation. We are going to talk all around podcasting and how that can help you amplify your message, get in front of new audiences to create new connections. So Christina, first off, just tell us like the 411 on you.
Yeah, let's get it. First of all, thank you so much for having me, Cass, and I'm so excited to be in front of your audience today. I know that the people listening to this are the exact type of people that can be guesting on podcasts. And to be clear, that's what we're talking about today is guesting on other people's podcasts and what that can do for the connections, for networking in your business, et cetera. And so I'm super, super excited to talk all about that. And I know it's very meta that I'm on someone's podcast as a guest talking about podcast guesting, but just roll with me on this one, I promise. So really for me and my background is I've been in the PR and marketing world for over 20 years. So I started out working in-house for companies, went to working for agencies, et cetera, kind of all in the PR space. And from small mall pop, type shops up to big, huge corporations like Cirque du Soleil, iRobot, other big companies doing marketing and PR work for them. And when I had my daughter in 2014, I went off on my own and decided that I freelanced for a couple of years. And then I was like, all right, I'm going to do a course. And like so many people that probably are listening to your episode, I was like, this is what I'm going to do. It's going to make me $1 million in my sleep. Perfect. Bing, bang, boom, done and done. And so I drank all the Kool-Aid. I did all the stuff. And I'm really, really thankful that I did it. But when it came to promoting that course, and that course was particularly on tourism PR, that was my areas of expertise. And the reason I'm saying that is it's going to become important shortly, is that I was going to teach people how to do it in that way. And I decided, hey, for this launch, I've never done this before. I've never launched a course before. I'm going to do this in the way that people are telling me exactly how to do it, which in that point in time was ads to webinars to obviously $1 million in sales with you not doing anything. And so I launched my course in that way. And a surprise to no one but me, it did not go well. It sold a couple, that's great. But I specifically remember my partner being like, so what are we doing here? And I was like, you don't get me. Like, you don't understand. Like, this is a work in progress, like whatever, but I knew the course was good. I knew that it was a really, really good course. And I just needed to figure out how to get in front of the right people. So I tapped back into my intuition. I was like, girl, you've already been doing PR for like 15 years. So why don't you start doing PR for yourself? You know what I mean? At this point. And so I started to pitch myself to pod. This was like 2018. So podcasts were a thing, but they weren't the thing they are today, like a part of our daily life, our lexicon, et cetera. And so I started to pitch myself on podcasts that were full of my ideal audiences. So tourism professionals, really anywhere in the world. And the difference in my business was night and day. I had people just buying my course right off the shelf, people that were asking me to consult, people that were having me come speak at their events. And it was all because they were hearing me on podcasts that know, like, and trust factor was upped dramatically, in a big, big way, to the point where they were like, oh, this chick knows what she's talking about. Okay, yeah, let's go ahead and buy this from her. And so I did that for a couple of years and it was great. I just continued to guest on shows. And that was really the main way that I was getting leads, really high quality leads into my business. And then COVID hit. And when COVID hit, that's why I said the tourism piece of this was going to come very important. I knew right away that there was not going to be money for PR. I knew that remember that like 3-week period when we all were like, we just watched Tiger King, we baked sourdough at it, and then we're just going to be back to normal life. Like no biggie. We just took a little 3-week pause, et cetera. And even with that, I knew that tourism was going to take a huge, huge hit to the money that they were going to have available because they make their money through hotel room stays, Airbnb stays, et cetera.
Right.
And so I started to think about how I was going to pivot. And I had already had in my mind that I wanted to teach particularly female entrepreneurs, but any entrepreneur, how to book themselves onto podcasts because I had seen the power of what it did in my own business. And so I started to do that. I started to teach people how to do it. It was so great during COVID because people just could do it from home. It didn't have to be a big thing. They could be sitting at home, talk to somebody, have it be a great way to get leads. And so I did that. And then by the end of that year, I had all these people that were like, no, this is great. I get it. But like, could you just do it for me? Like, could you just book and I kind of railed against it for a little bit, but then I leaned in and I was like, you know what? Yes, let's do it. I'm going to start an agency. I'm going to do it my way. I'm going to have certain things that I'm going to do my way after all that experience I had working at agencies. And that has, so that was about 4 years ago. And now we're at our full agency and our team. And that's what we do day in and day out is get our clients booked on the podcasts that are full of their ideal audiences.
Very cool. And I will say, everyone, her agency pitched her to my podcast and I just
Yes.
her before we started. Greatest pitch I've seen, like so thoughtful, so intentional,
Yeah.
Could tell they had listened to the show.
Yeah.
Really, really well done. So I'm very impressed. I'm like, when I'm ready for it, I'll be coming your way.
You come my way, girl. You come my way. I love it.
Love to know, just kind of starting off this kind of process of podcast guesting, we're all about relationships and connections here, right? And so how does being a guest on a podcast kickstart that process?
I love that you asked this question. So the thing that I like to say about marketing, because that's what podcast guesting ultimately is, but I'm going to break that down a little bit more. There are 3 pillars to your marketing: owned, earned, and paid. Okay. So owned is the stuff that you have control over: your website, your social media channels. That's Cass's podcast. That's her own, marketing that she has there. She controls what goes out over this platform. Then there is paid, which, shock to no one that's listening, is when you pay, right? So that's ads. That might be an influencer campaigns, a sponsorship, something like that, where you're exchanging money and you're getting people looking at your stuff in return, right? And then earned. And earned is where publicity falls under. And what that means is no money is exchanged. I didn't pay to be on Cass's podcast, right? This is a strictly publicity-based appearance. And so what that means is I am coming onto her platform, and in exchange for her getting me in front of her audience, I am providing value to that audience. I am coming and giving a perspective that perhaps they haven't heard before. And that is where publicity really comes into play. It is that earned marketing in the work that you're doing. And the reason that I like to point this out, or the reason that I believe in it so much, is because it has an incredible area of impact, like an incredible scope of impact. So when you're on your owned channels, like we were just talking about, it is a wonderful way to really build that brand ecosystem with people that already know you, that are already in your world. They found you through some way, and now they want to learn more about you, learn about what you have going on. Paid brings a lot of cold leads into our business that then can be warmed up through those own channels as well, right? Again, they're going to get to know you, etc. The thing about earned is it's getting you in front of new people. It is how you are finding those leads into your business. Okay. And the nice thing about doing it in this way and doing it through publicity is that they come to you warm. They come to you ready to work with you. They have that know, like, and trust factor built in. They're like, I heard them on this. I really, really resonated with what they had to say, or I really liked what they had to say. Now I want to find out more. And that's a great opportunity to then lead you into those owned channels, right? Again, to get them to know you even more, even better. But I will say, for a lot of our clients, truly, there's a lot of nurturing that can happen. But for a lot of people, it's just people that book discovery calls right away, people that apply to work with them right away. They hear them on a show and they're ready to take action.
For sure. Yeah, I would say even for myself, when I go on podcasts a lot to speak around networking and like demystifying networking, and then about LinkedIn. And I have podcasts that are even like pre-pandemic episodes that I still get messages about. The people go, hey, I just heard your episode. And I'm like, I don't know how you dug that out of the grave, but great. And want to connect on LinkedIn now and want to, like tell me more about what you do. So I definitely see it. Yeah. I think it's just a fast way of building rapport with people and the right people.
Yeah.
Like you said, it's getting, if you get with the right audience, it's building rapport with the right people that you're not wasting time. Like it's going to a party that's select instead of going to a giant party, meeting 100 people and going, well, 5 would be good connections. You're like, I'm at a party just for the cool kids, right? Whatever version of cool kids is. So I guess with that, you've said like getting in front of the right audience. How do people find the right audience, the right podcasts with the right audience to guest on?
I love this question. And I've got 2 ways that I really recommend for people. The first one is something that y'all can be doing today. And that is, I want you to get on Instagram or LinkedIn or wherever that you have an active platform. And I want you to ask your audience what shows they listen to. Yeah, as simple as that. Put it up as a story, put it up as a poll, put it up as whatever. Ask people what shows that they are listening to. And I like to do it in a way of, because it's very true for me. I'm like, hey, we're always looking for new shows to check out for our clients or for myself, et cetera. What are some of your favorite shows? Like I just do it as a question, and then people can respond with those answers there. And I will always find new shows that I have never heard of before. Also, a lot of people in my audience, this is just personally, know that I'm a big true crime fan. So they'll also send me some pretty cool true crime ones for me to listen in on also. But we always get some really great business, entrepreneur, health and wellness minded stuff, et cetera, too. And that is just an easy thing for you to get some answers from your audience. You're not that big on social media, or also put it in a PS on your next e-newsletter. Hey, hit me back, hit reply. Let me know what some of your favorite shows are. It's really, really cool to see what people like to listen to. I like to do that multiple times throughout the year because I'll always get new answers and different answers from people. And we all find podcasts all the time that we find interesting and we want to binge. And I don't know about you, but it's like we find a podcast and I don't want to tell everybody about it. You know what I mean too? Like I'm sending it to my family members. I'm like, oh, you should, this is one you need to listen to. It's like we get really excited about it in that way. So why not give people the opportunity to share? So that is number one. Just ask your audience. That's a real low-hanging fruit, really easy way to kind of see what's up there. Secondarily, I have this method that I call the podcast piggyback method. And so what I mean by that is you're going to go into whatever your player of choice is. For mine, it's Apple Podcasts. That's what I like to do a lot of my research on personally. You're going to go in there and you're going to put in someone that has a similar audience to you, someone that has a similar ideal audience to you. Okay. So put in their name, put it into Apple Podcasts, see what shows they've been on. Those are great shows for you to also be pitching. By the way, this could be someone that's a competitor, but it could also not be. It could just be someone that has a similar audience to you, right? They don't need to be a direct competitor by any means. But also if they are a competitor, by the way, that shouldn't shy you away from pitching. You just want to make sure you're pitching something different than what it is they talked about on that show. Okay. So there's a lot of different opportunities there. But what's really cool is I like to go into the shows that they've been on, and then I scroll down to the bottom to that you might also like, or people that listen to this also like this. And that's where you start going into that rabbit hole. That's when you really start going down like, oh, wow. I mean, you guys, there's over 1 million podcasts. Like there are so many podcasts out there. So it's just kind of figuring out that. And that's why I think this is a really easy, great way to do that is like, who else has your audience? What shows have they been on? And then what are shows like that you could potentially also be pitching to?
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. That's really helpful. Because yes, I've asked my audience before, but I am going to do it again. I'm like, I think I'll throw that in my next email. I just need new stuff to listen to. But I think there's something of letting people know, like, I want the niche show. Like, I don't need the Amy Porterfield one, the Jenna Kutcher. Like, they're fine people, but like, I know about those. Tell me the one that you love that you don't think every one of your friends is already listening to,
I love that. And I think you could really message it in that way, right? Like, integrate, like we all enjoy an Amy Porterfield episode, a Jenna Kutcher episode, to that point, but we all do know what that is. So it's like, what are those more niche shows? And you could even be more specific. Hey, I'm looking for shows that talk to creative entrepreneurs. I'm looking for shows that speak to XYZ, right? Like you get specific about that and ask your audience if they have ideas, right? Because the other cool thing about this is you will sometimes, I've had this happen where people are like, oh, I know the host of this show. I can intro you.
Yeah.
Boom. Like then you're already, honestly, you're halfway there. At that point, you still got to send a pitch, but you've already got the connection that you kind of need to make that happen.
Yeah. Okay. I want to talk podcast audience size, but there was something before that.
Well,
It'll come back to me. Let's podcast audience size, and then I will come back to it. So one of the things, I think there's kind of two different ways, right? There's the person just starting out who's never been on any podcast. And then there's the person who has done some, and they've realized that they've done a podcast that they're like, I don't think even their mom listens. So why am I doing this? Right? So how much should someone, I have my own theories on this now. How much should someone care about audience size?
So I'm going to tell you, first off, you will never know the audience size. So the audience size is not public information. So I very much steer people away from getting really hung up in the size of an audience. I totally hear you on like, hey, I've never been on a show before. Like, I'm just trying to maybe get my feet under me a little bit. So I don't necessarily care versus I want to make sure this is worth my time.
Right.
And for me, what I really want you to be focused on is who is listening to that show. Because even if 100 people are listening to that show, but it is your exact 100 people that are listening to that show, it is absolutely worth an hour of your time for you to go and guest on that show. Our clients, I will tell you this right now, have been on some of the biggest shows that are out there, and they make more money on the smaller niched shows. And I think that that is a really important distinction to have. When a lot of people are listening to a show, it is great for your credibility. It is great for your visibility. I am not saying don't do it, but when it comes to your bottom line, you will make way more money when you are on these smaller niche shows that maybe not a ton of people are listening to, but again, the right people are listening to, and they trust that host implicitly. They trust who that host brings on. They trust what that host has to say. So when that person comes on, they instantly trust them because they already trust that host. You know what I mean? And so I think that I really love to say to people, and you kind of gave a perfect example of this earlier about a small party. It's like, I would always 10 out of 10 times rather have a show that has 500 people that are my exact right audience listening to me, as opposed to a show that has 5,000 people where no one gives a what about what I'm talking about. And I think that's what's so important about that. So really it's focusing a lot on who that ideal audience is, making sure that the shows are that. And then, of course, as you continue to grow and you continue to do more and more shows, there's going to be an opportunity for you to ladder step up into some of those bigger shows that are still going to be a great audience for you.
Right. Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, I don't want to be somebody's first guest if they don't have an audience yet, right? But at the same time, it's like, it's more about, well, do you know who your audience is? If you know who specifically we're talking to, then great. If it's 20 people, cool. But if you're like, this just for average, like this is my personal favorite is when they go, I just want to have on women to tell their stories. And I go, cool. There's 8,000 of those. Who are we talking to? Like, it needs to be more than that, I completely agree with you too. And I've heard that before. I know people who will list off, I've been on all the big guys, got nothing. I went on not me, but like a friend saying this will say like, I went on a podcast that was for executives in the financial sector focused on animals. I mean, it'll be something crazy. And they're like, and I got 7 clients and you're like,
exactly. 100%. A perfect example of this is just like that. We have a client who runs a bookkeeping accounting firm, and she loves to get in front of beauty salon owners, medical salon owners, estheticians, people that run their own business, but particularly are in the medical space or the beauty space, like med spa, etc. She makes bank. She gets so many clients off going on those shows because they are listening specifically to hear advice from people that know that industry, people that understand that industry. And she is able to go on there and be like, here's 3 tax write-offs you probably didn't know about being in the beauty industry, right?
Yeah.
And they go gaga for that stuff. They are like, oh, and the fact that they have heard her on a show means that trust factor is up to lot. Because you better believe if I'm letting someone look at my money, I need to trust them, right? Yeah. So they already feel that they have that connection to her because they've heard her talk about this stuff, right? And she was talking in their mind to them. And so I love that you brought that up and kind of said that. It's like, again, to reiterate, we've had clients on some of those biggest shows, but the ones that make the money are those really niche audiences that are there to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, no, I love that. I remembered the other thing I was going to say, just a tip with the
Yes.
niche podcasts, with the small ones. What I have found, I don't know if you found this to be true, but with both podcasts and I'll say YouTube, the newer shows, the smaller shows tend to give away a lot more information because they don't know all the marketing rules yet of, oh, I'm only supposed to say this much. I feel like you can gain a lot more expert tactical info when you go to those
That's
smaller.
really
I'm
interesting.
sure we
Yeah.
all sat through a podcast on a big channel or a big, it's got a big audience and you clicked on it because of the title. And then they kind of touched on that for one sentence and it had nothing to do with the episode.
Right.
What was the point? Like, and then there are others that give you all this advice that you go, am I one of the 5 people who listen to that? Like, I'm so happy I was the 5 because nobody doing the things they're telling.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that. And it makes me think if any of y'all listening are Great British Bake Off fans, we're big fans at our house.
Okay.
There's one thing they say on there, which is style over substance. And that's like exactly that, where it's like, okay, it's marketed right. It's hitting all the keywords that I want to see, right? But when it comes to the actual episode, it's just fluff, right?
Yeah.
And so what you're saying is in some of these more niche podcasts, and I agree with you, that does happen a lot, is it's going to get way more tactical, way more in the weeds, a lot more stuff that you're really looking for, even if it doesn't have the prettiest cover art, it doesn't have all the keywords that you're looking for, right, et cetera. And so I think that's a really great point to make.
Yeah, thanks. So speaking of tactical, I want to get tactical in a second and talk about actual pitches, but I do have a question first. And if this is like a little too outside the wheelhouse, totally fine. Not everyone in my audience is a business owner. I also have people that are like building their brand within corporations, within companies, like building that brand. Do you think anyone can be a podcast guest?
I do think that anyone can be a podcast guest. Absolutely. But I do think that you have to think about what that end goal. So this is all strategic, right? This work is all getting you out there in front of the right audiences. If that makes sense for what you do in a corporate environment, abso-freaking-lutely. Like there's no rule against people that work for corporate, like not being able to go on podcasts. Absolutely not. I just think you need to think about what is the point? What is that end goal of this? And that may very well make sense for what you do. And then for other companies and organizations, it might not. Right. So it just kind of depends on like what that thing is that you're looking to have accomplished at the end.
Yeah, I can just see where it's interesting. I feel like podcast guesting hasn't hit the corporate side yet, except for maybe CEO level. But even in that, it's still a trend that executives are creating their own personal brand because it impacts the company. And it's like those executives could go be podcast guests to talk about their story or their thing. But I think even if there's someone listening that's like entry level, you can pitch yourself as the Gen Zer who wants to share what Gen Zers are thinking as they enter the corporate world.
Like the only thing if you work for corporate is right, you would need to make sure you get approvals. You need to make sure you have whatever. But if it's just you going on and talking about whatever, and you're not representing the brand you work for in any way, absolutely go and do that. Get those snippets. The thing that I like to say about corporate, and like my partner works for a large corporate entity here in Boise, right? And so it's very fascinating to me in a lot of ways to see the difference of an entrepreneur or a small business owner versus someone that works in a more corporate environment. And so that's why when I talk about does it make sense, I think it makes sense for what that end goal is. If your end goal as a corporation is that you want to get in front of consumers, maybe small business owners, et cetera, that makes a lot of sense. But if your main goal is like, I want to get in front of other people that work at corporate, that is very difficult. And the reason that I say that is because we have totally different mindsets. And what I mean by that is when I listen to podcasts, a lot of the time when I'm not doing my true crime stuff, I'm listening to business podcasts to know how to run my business smarter, more effectively, et cetera. Like I was telling Cass before we got on, how I was listening to one of her episodes this morning on my walk, right? So like I'm listening to stuff like that because as a business owner, I always have a growth mindset going on, right? My partner is listening to he works and he's high up in a big corporate company. He is listening to podcasts about sports, about comedy, about whatever. He is doing everything to not think about work in those moments when he's listening to podcasts. And so I think that that's and it's something I have found to be true. Just kind of, again, we're generalizing, and this isn't the case for everybody, but it is something that I have found to be true, is that people that work in more corporate environments, when they listen to podcasts, it is more for entertainment. They are not necessarily listening to learn a new skill or learn something else. That's not really what they're doing it for. And so that's why when I talk about that, that's what I mean is like, it depends on what that end goal is. Because again, if the end goal is a consumer, if the end goal is a whatever, that could make a ton of sense. But if the end goal is like other big wigs at corporate, like that's difficult.
No, I totally agree with that. That makes sense. Okay, so let's get tactical. First off, people will learn that it can be a struggle. So that's why they need you. But if there are people who wanted to start, not everyone's at that point. If there are people who wanted to start going for it, I like to start mistakes first. What are mistakes you see that people should avoid?
I love that.
Because I think sometimes it's almost easier to just not this, do that instead of the other way around.
Exactly. I love that. So the first thing that kind of pops in my mind is doing what we call a spray and pray method of pitching. And I guarantee to you, Cass has been on the receiving end of this. She'll be able to tell y'all. But basically what that means is people that just write one pitch and then they send it to a ton of people. They do not personalize it at all. They do no research at all. They basically scrape a list of shows and then just send the same pitch to every single person, even if it makes no sense for the actual person that's being pitched. And so we call that the spray and pray method, but it is just an immediate trash from most hosts that I know. They get these regularly. They know the person hasn't looked at their show. They know the person has no idea what's going on with their show. Half the time, they don't even use their name. You know what I mean? It's just like, dear host, dear producer, dear whatever. Y'all, I'll tell you right now, the names are in Apple Podcast. Like you can literally have the name very, very quickly. Like it's not a big deal. But these are the little things that are going to get you the bookings that you want. So I would just say, like you talked about very kindly at the beginning of this episode, and something we really pride ourselves on is we truly do look at every single show we pitch for our clients. We want to make sure that it is the right fit for our clients. And, we as publicists are listening to some of that show, making sure that it's the right fit, making sure we know what topics make sense. And I'll get into topics in a second. But that is where you are really going to see a lot of mileage, is just taking the time to do a little bit of research. I'm not saying you need to listen to 5 episodes. I'm not saying you need to spend all these hours of time, but just make it so that the host realizes you get what their show is about and who they are talking to. The other thing that I like to mention is, like, I think that people think they're making it easy for a host, or they're trying to help the host by just giving like a bulleted list of the things that they can talk about, right? So meaning like, hey, I'm an expert in sales, marketing, whatever. And then like kind of leaving it to the host to be like, so you tell me what you want to talk about and I'm good. Like, you just tell me and I'm ready to go. And that is the opposite of being helpful to a host.
Yeah.
Okay. You need to make it. This goes back to my journalism days at Oregon State University, in the early aughts, if I may date myself in that way, is we are trying to make it as easy to get to as possible. So we want to provide solid topics. We want to literally say, I know that you haven't talked about this on your show, or at least in the research we've done, we haven't seen you talking about this on your show. Here's 2 to 4 solid ideas that we think would make a lot of sense for your audience. And you're always going to word it that way. Make sense for your audience. Provide value for your audience. Now, you're not going on there to just talk about you. Okay. You are going on there to be like, how can I provide value? And then that's what you're letting that host know. So I think the topics is the other really big no-no that I see, is people kind of doing that. And again, them thinking that they're making it like easier, when in fact you're just making it so then the host now has to think of a topic around what it, one of these things, like it just becomes, not what you're looking to achieve.
Yeah. No, that's great. And I think that's really true, because people think I like that you said, you think you're being helpful. That's what I have learned with so much communication, even that people bring to me, is I know you think you're being helpful when you say this, it's really hurting you. And they think they're being helpful when they give that list. But instead, now it's like being in the cereal aisle at the grocery store. And I'm going, I don't know, which do I get now, and how do I connect that to what I do? Like, connect the dots for me. I will say, with the pitch given to me, one of the things I loved was that I knew it was actually listened to because one of your topics was similar to a topic I just had on. And the person still gave it, like your publicist gave it. I know you just had someone on this, but I think we could do a different convo. I went, thank you for just addressing the elephant in the room, that it's like, hey, I know I saw you just had this. And I'm like, great. Because if that hadn't been there, maybe I would have gone, okay, they didn't watch because we literally just talked about this. And there's a way to do it. Because she addressed it, I went, okay, wow, she actually paid attention. And then she put on a different one. I think this is what you should talk about. And after reading it, I had already thought the same thing. I went, yeah, I think this is the one. Okay, cool. We're both on the same page. Like, it was great.
Yes, I love that.
Because yeah, I've had plenty of pitches, even for YouTube stuff, where people will think they're personalizing, and it's like they just inserted title of video here, inserted title of episode here.
Yes.
That's not customization.
Yeah, that ain't it.
You're telling them to take it a step further, and I think this goes to matters in all relationships for building opportunities, whether it's to be a guest on a podcast, get a new job, etc. It has to be customized. Like you can format, you can template to a level, but at a certain spot you have to personalize it. And I do know, I think isn't Nathan Barry the head of ConvertKit, now just Kit? Isn't that his name? I think that's him.
Yes,
I remember
it is.
him.
Yeah.
Right.
They're based in Boise, so I know them very well. Yes.
I was going to say, I'm like, they are based in Boise. Do you know them? As if, I didn't want to do that. Everyone in Boise knows each other, right? So I remember, this is years and years and years ago when he was building ConvertKit, but it was already a pretty big deal. I remember he got on a podcast and said, I send individual emails to people. It's like he has a company that's about mass emailing. And he talked about, like, when I want certain things, when I want certain outcomes, he's like, and I know I could send 200 in a day and that'll take me all day long, but I'll get a return because I personalized them. And so I think it's the same with these pitches. You've got to actually do a little bit of customization that's more than just insert title.
Yes, absolutely. I love you brought that up because I will see that regularly where you can just tell they took the latest episode title and just put that in and just pasted it in and then nothing else other than it's like, okay, it's obvious what happened here. Yes. So trust me when I tell you, hosts get a lot of emails. So they know your tricks. They know the things that you're doing. They know that that's your attempt at personalization, that you're doing the spray and pray, whatever. So when you send a really great, solid pitch, that's going to put you that much closer to getting a yes and to getting on the shows that you want to get onto.
So do you have any tips on subject lines to get them to open it?
That's a great question. So we do have a couple things that we kind of have as best practices. Also, I'll just go ahead and say it. ChatGPT is a great place to find ideas for subject lines, okay? I mean, we don't use ChatGPT for pitches, but we absolutely will get ideas for subject lines in that way because it'll spit out some good ones. Some of them are not going to be good, but others are going to be good. So I definitely you could absolutely always put your pitch into it and be like, hey, give me a subject line. Give me 5 subject line ideas, right? Give me 10 subject line ideas and see if one is there. A couple things that work well for us is to use the host name in the subject line. Okay. So that is definitely a big thing that we do, by no means all the time, but it's a great best practice. And we find that works really well because it gets their attention in the end. We also try to do something, and again, this is where kind of ChatGPT can come in handy, is try to maybe do something that's on the edge of what people are saying. And what I mean by that is we have a client who's a credit card points expert. And so we have a subject line and we just tweaked it. And it's been doing, this is also, you'll find you sometimes have to tweak them and tweak all this stuff. But we just tweaked it to be more flying first class in this economy. You know what I mean? Something like that makes, we've heard from hosts, they're like, I really love that subject line. That made me smile. It made me chuckle, and I opened it up. So don't be afraid to have a little bit of fun with the subject line because ultimately you're trying to get the open. You're trying to get them to click on it and actually look at it. So I actually think the subject line is one of the more playful spots that you can kind of be and just play around, try some different stuff, see what responses you get. We found that when we use the word credit card in the subject line, it didn't get opened as much. So that was why we decided let's take that out, let's change it up. And we're getting a lot more responses from the host. So that's absolutely the type of stuff that you can be doing just by noticing and tracking kind of the stuff that you're sending.
Yeah. I like that. Yeah, because that's the thing is people spend so much time on the message, and it's like, well, if your subject line sucks, no one saw it.
Yep.
It's kind of
Yep.
it's the
No
same
one's, I
as
mean, if they
doing
don't open the
titles for
email,
podcasts.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Would you think before we kind of go into like
Yeah.
our final kind of the final question I always ask, but any thoughts on how to create long-term relationships or follow up best practices after like you've come in front of that right audience? Let's say people
Mhm.
didn't jump straight to a discovery call, but they're going, "Hey,
Mhm.
I'm now in your audience because I heard you on this show." What do you think people should do after that?
So I want to talk about audience, but I really want to talk about host relationships. So don't let me forget to
Yeah,
do that.
I was going to say because
Um,
there's two pieces to this,
Two.
Emily.
There's
Yep.
two pieces to this, and a lot of people sleep on that one. So we're going to get into it. But when it comes to the audience, you want to make sure you have a great call to action page. Okay. So we recommend for our clients that they have one page that they are directing all podcast traffic to. So you can have it be something that's like /pod, right? Like, /GIF, whatever it is. It can be your regular website. But that's a really, really great way for you to track how many people are coming off of podcast and getting one or your free gift, right? Whatever.
Right.
So what you want to do is you always want to have a way for them to either apply or have a discovery call booked directly, just with you right off the bat. But then if they're not ready for that, if they're a little trigger shy, we've all been there. There's some other ways, that they can get like a free gift or something of value from that. So make sure that you have that page set, and make sure that you have those call to actions, like whatever your freebie is going to be, set with nurture emails on the back end. That is the key, y'all. That is the key. Do not sleep on those nurture emails. Don't have someone just get the gift and then go right into your email sequence. Like, they should be going and getting nurtured into hopping on a call, applying, buying your course, whatever it is that you kind of have that you're trying to ultimately direct people to. And on that call to action page, have your socials listed there. Make it so they can easily follow you there. Some people, they're even too nervous to get on your email list. We all kind of went through that time where like we joined everybody's email list, and now people are very, very hesitant to get on someone's email list. So being able to see if you've had a bump in socials, like over a 6-month, 12-month time period from doing this work consistently, that's super helpful, right? To be able to say like, oh, I've had a lot more LinkedIn connections. I've had a lot of people join on Instagram, because a lot of people aren't going to tell you that's where they found you, right? That's the one thing about being a guest on podcasts. You can't really track it like you can track other stuff. Right. So we kind of are looking at the general momentum, right? Like, okay, we know that over this time frame, your list grew this much. We know over this time frame, your followers grew this much. And so we know that momentum, that visibility is heading in the right direction. One thing I will say that I love to tell our clients is put podcast interviews in your nurture sequence. Have some nurture sequence emails, even if it's in the PS that's like, hey, want to hear me talk about this even further? Listen to my episode on XYZ. Again, you're just upping that they're just listening to you again, right? They're hearing you again. They're like, okay, yes, they're talking about it there. This makes sense. But it's a great, great thing to put in nurture sequences. And also the reason I say one page for your call to action is because, like you were talking about, we don't want someone to find this show 4 years from now and that link is broken. We want a link to be there that they will always be able to get to. You might change the freebie, you might change the application, you might change your social media, whatever, but that link will be there for them to be able to go to something and be able to get in contact with your company, et cetera. Because it doesn't happen as much anymore, but I definitely would see that back in the day where people would have it go to like a specific launch or a specific event or something like that. Well, 6 months down the road, that thing's, it's not going to be
the challenge. They no longer run. Yeah.
Exactly. Except for the service they no longer even offer. You know what I mean? So we want to make sure that we have a way, even if it's socials, but they have a way to get, find us and get in touch with us in that way. So I always like to make that really clear, because I listen to podcasts that are years old. I binge them. Like I find one I like, and then I'm like, well, let's just go back. It absolutely happens.
I'm going to add this to my ever-growing list of things to do that we all have. I'm going to go make one. I think that's a good idea, because I too, like I said, I've talked on different podcasts for different topics. I have different things I send people to. And sometimes those things, when I get on a podcast, it blends. And now I'm like, well, wait, was I sending them to the LinkedIn thing or the connection?
Which one was I sending them to? Yeah.
Which was it? So to just free up the space to go, it's /podcast, it's done. Like
Exactly.
They're all there. Take your pick. Yeah. That's great. Okay.
And the beauty of that is, I was just going to say real quickly on the back end of that it's going to bump your SEO to that page like crazy when all the podcasts are going back to that one page too. So it has like multiple effects that it's doing.
Yeah, cool. Okay. Talk about the host relationship.
Okay, let's get in it. So I think a lot of people think that guesting on podcasts, and I know you, I'm sure, have experiences too, where people think like, oh, I'm on the show and I get in front of this new audience. And then obviously I get hundreds of leads. It's almost like me with the courses, right? And then they're like, I get hundreds of leads to my business, obviously become clients, right? Et cetera. And I'm here to tell y'all that, I mean, we hope that'll happen. We want you to get in front of this audience and get some great leads. But I would even argue the biggest connection of you being a guest on podcasts is your relationship with the hosts and what's going to come of that. And what I mean by that is I'm here having a genuine conversation with Cass. I am here talking about stuff. We are having a conversation. She's giving her input. I'm giving my input, etc. This is not something you're just doing on day in and day out necessarily with people in your business, right? So that means that we have a different level of connection than if we just followed each other on social, right? There's something else that's going on there. And so what's going to happen, spoiler alert, is that after we hit end on this recording, I'm going to thank Cass a whole lot for having me on the show because I get to get in front of everyone that's listening now. And by the way, if you don't know, putting on a podcast is a ton of work. So I am genuinely thanking hosts because I know how much work that they put into it. But beyond that, I am going to say this simple, magical phrase, y'all. And this is what to surprise my clients more than anything is I will say, now what value can I provide to you? And I will come with ideas. So I will be like, I noticed you have a mastermind. Would you like me to come and teach in your mastermind? I know you have a membership. Should we I'm doing that actually next week for a podcast host. Like we're just doing a Q&A on podcast guesting within her membership, right? There are so many different ideas. I'd love to become an affiliate partner of you. Are you interested in becoming an affiliate partner of me as well? Would you like to be on my podcast if I had a podcast, right? There's a lot of different things that you can be putting out there. One of the easiest things is, would you like to do an Instagram live when this episode airs, right? That's a really great one because then they're also going to get in front of your audience too, right? So that is really the magic thing that I talk about with hosts. And my clients have been astounded at what that has done in their business by asking that simple phrase of podcasts, right? They have then been speaking at their mastermind events. They have been invited to speak at their summit. We have one client, I love her so much. She's like an expert in QuickBooks and she writes like the #1 Amazon bestselling QuickBooks book each year. And her book became like the business book club's book of the month, right? For this host that she was on the show for. And then she came and did like a live Q&A with them, etc. Like these are things that you don't even know about until you're a guest on the show. And I know you're such a fan of networking and you get this too, but it's almost like when you go to an event, things come out of going to an event that you can never expect. And that is how being on a podcast is as well. You have to be open to the opportunities and that host relationship that's going to come there. Some of the hosts that I've worked with have become some of my best referral partners. They have become just great friends. You know what I mean? Just people in my life where we support one another in our business. So never ever sleep on that host relationship. And I think it's one of the biggest points of networking that comes out of podcasting.
No, I completely agree. And I think that's first off, I'm a big fan of saying thank you. Everyone needs to say thank you more. So that's always part of my follow-up system with people is you say thank you.
Yes.
And then I like the way you ask the question. Can you say the question again the way you said it? What value?
Yeah. Now, how can I provide value to you? And then I come with ideas.
So I love this because I don't know if you saw it, but I have my whole big thing on networking is we have been told give value way too much. I won't rant on it here because you all can go listen to the episode from 2 weeks ago on it.
Episode below. Yeah.
People give unsolicited value without knowing what the person needs. Right? I'm saying when they do it first off, when you first met somebody at a party and then you go home and you're like,
sure.
Hey, I looked at your website and I thought your copy could do a redo. So I did. And you're like, that's insulting. So I love that you're asking them, like, it's still an open invitation of saying, I want to help, but you're saying, what is valuable to you? And I think that then starting with that and then going,
here are some things I can think of, but what do you need?
But I'm open.
That's
exactly.
a really balanced way of doing it. I really, really like that. I think that's great. And I'm thinking of like, there are other ways people can use that too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
In the podcast guesting, I think that's the thing is a lot of people, and I'll be honest, myself included at times, you go on a podcast and you're like, that was great. But sometimes the host doesn't, I've been bad about this before. Sometimes the host doesn't let you know what day it's coming out, etc.
Oh,
you
yeah.
recorded it and you're done and you forget, like, keep up in that way. It's like, you need to, because you're right. Those are the relationships. Like, think about how many other people that person has had hour-long conversation with.
Exactly. Where you generally got pretty deep too. You know what I mean? Like where you really went into it. You know what I mean? Cass already knows this, but I was saying, hey, I might come to this event that's in your area in the new year. Like, how amazing is that going to be that I'm going to be at this event? And then I just ended the sentence there, that I'm going to be at this event, but that I'm going to be there with someone. I mean, she's not coming, like Cass isn't necessarily coming with me, but if she was also there, it's like, well, I already know someone there then. There's already someone I know that is going to be able to introduce me to maybe some other people in the room, and vice versa. As I meet people in the room, I'm able to introduce her to them too, right? So like, there's so many different layers and ways that this can go on. And I can't even tell you how many events I'm at. Actually, it is kind of funny because I love to go to events. I absolutely love it. So I do, but I will see people all the time that will be like, they will be people that I was on their show and I won't have even known they were going to the event. We might not have known that. And then we're just so excited and we take photos and we're so jazzed. We go out to dinner, you know, all these things. And it's all because those relationships were made and formed when I was a guest on the show.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I was at an event a month ago that I saw beforehand. There were roundtables at it. I saw the roundtable host, and one was someone who I was on her podcast like in 2019, and we've never met each other. And I messaged her and went, oh my gosh, we're going to be in the same room. And when I say we've kept in touch since then, I mean a message every year or so, you know, because it's been 5 years, but we ended up sitting at the same table and chatting and everything. You know, it's great. You get to go deep fast without having to do the like, hey, would you like to get on a call? I'd love to talk more. Like, you just go straight into stuff, which I love. Okay, I've taken up way too much of your time. We've gone over.
We're good.
So a couple of things. First, tell people like where they can follow you, keep up with you, anywhere you want to send them to. And then we have talked about a lot of things today, and I like that you've given so many tactical action-packed nuggets. But is there one place you would have people start?
The one place that I would have people start is your mindset, because I guarantee that there are a lot of people that are listening today that are like, no, this all sounds good. I would never do that. I would never go be on someone's show. I could never go talk and have this kind of a conversation with somebody and not sound like a robot, sweat or whatever. I really think it's important for you to know that you got this. And also it is a muscle. I am on here able to answer all these questions that Cass is giving because I've been on over 60, 70 podcasts. That is why I'm able to do this. I still, though, by the way, listen to the show. I still do all this stuff beforehand. So trust me, I'm still doing things beforehand, but I feel very confident in really any question that might get sent my way because I've done this a lot of times. And that is really how our clients feel as well. You know, when they work with us for a year, they're on 24 podcasts. So that has been a big thing for a lot of our clients is at the end, they're like, I just feel so confident. And like, people could ask me a question and I'm like ready to go. Like at the beginning, I didn't feel that way. I'd never done a podcast interview before, et cetera. But, you know, after 5 or 6, they were feeling a lot more comfortable. And by the way, we all stumble through our first interviews. So do not get stressed out about that or whatever. It's actually a great time to be on your buddy's podcast or someone that, you know, because you kind of get those first few interview jitters out. You're not going for Amy Porterfield right out the gate. And by the way, you wouldn't want to. You wouldn't be a great guest because you wouldn't be fully prepared what it is that you want to be talking about and saying, et cetera. So I really think it's so important. And the thing that I take people back to a lot is I want you to think, what's the worst that could happen? What do you truly think is the worst that could happen? And people will give the, you know, what if I say something wrong? Okay, it can be edited out. What if I do? Yeah, I mean, most of these aren't live. It's not an issue. I truly believe the worst that can happen is you do not put yourself out there because your business will not grow. If you are not getting in front of new audiences, you are just doing the same things over and over again, you are not getting in front of new people and your business will not grow. So I truly believe that in my heart of hearts, you can do it. Also, for my introverts out there, this is one of the best ways to do marketing because it is just a one-on-one conversation. I would say most of our clients actually identify as introverts, and this is why they love it. It's not them getting out in front of a bunch of people. So, I'm ready, but like, it is a one-on-one conversation with someone that is genuinely interested in what it is you have to say and talk about, right? So you got this, get out there. It's a muscle. You got to just practice it. You're going to get better and better as you go. So that would be my advice. Like, for the one thing to get started is like, get ready and know that like you got it.
Right. I love that. That's great. No, because it's true. That's partly why I asked the question of like, what if you think you're not the right, like, can anyone be a podcast guest? Because I think there are a lot of people go, oh, I couldn't be a podcast guest. Like, yes, even you. Everyone has some message they can tell. Yes. Okay, so where can people find you? If people want to connect more, what should they do?
Absolutely. So I have a private podcast that is a 6-part series on how we pitch our clients, and people love it. They love to hear like what our strategy is, etc. So you can grab that at publicitypodcast.com. I'm a big fan of a vanity URL, y'all. Big fan of a vanity URL. So podcastpublicity.com is where you can find that. You can always follow me on Instagram at publicityxchristina. It's Publicity by Christina. I thought I was really clever, guys, and that's haunted me ever since. But it's publicityxchristina. There you can find me. I would love to hear from you. If you heard me on this podcast episode, I would love to hear any insights. Nothing makes me happier than when I get messages from people that are like, I just heard you on XYZ podcast, loved what you had to say, or I'm feeling really fired up about pitching myself to podcasts. So please, please, please don't be shy. It makes my day.
Cool. I'm taking notes on that too. I'm like, I'm going to go listen to it because this has been a real kick in the pants for me on some things I need to do in this area again too. So this is great. Yeah. Thank you so much for joining me, and go listen to more episodes of the podcast here if you are on YouTube, or I'll send you a link down in the show notes for what you should listen to next. Bye.